to be frank, the behaviour of its proprietor, most recently in the last few days, when England has suffered a great atrocity in Southport. Something that has really shaken the nation and, of course, led to these terrible riots. And what has Mr Musk taken it upon himself to do in that moment to our Prime Minister as he seeks to assuage the nation and contain these riots? He's gone to war with the Prime Minister.
Imran, tell us about this global internet forums of counterterrorism. People may not necessarily have heard of it. How significant a thing is it in limiting the spread of potentially terrorist content?
Okay, so GIFC is an incredibly important body for social media companies because it's their proof that they can self-regulate, especially when it comes to terrorist and extremist content. Its record is patchy, to be frank, because of course its constituent platforms have not done a great job in the past. But nevertheless, it has maintained quite a lot of credibility within counter-extremism and counter-terrorism circles.
So an example would be there's best practice for platforms in saying, here is a video from someone who wants to talk up whatever they're thinking, and best practice for getting rid of it so fewer people see it. Is it that sort of thing?
It's exactly that. It's the kind of video that we saw the Christchurch killer who filmed a first-person video of him committing that atrocious massacre in New Zealand. It's to try and ensure that content by ISIS, for example, doesn't get to have that algorithmic amplification that gets it to millions, potentially even billions of people on social media. And of course, X is one of the founder members of that organization.
And so has X's role in this body and all its performance in this area got worse? Because lots of people would say, and we've said it on our program an awful lot, you can see just by being on X how things feel like standards have slipped in the last few years since Musk took over. Is this a good example of that, do you think?
I think X has become rather the embarrassment to the rest of the members of the GIFC. I'm not saying that X is necessarily doing the absolute worst job of any of those platforms. In fact, they're all quite poor. But it's Elon Musk's almost brazen confidence in talking about how he permits any kind of speech on his platform. The fact that it's so visible to journalists, politicians who use X disproportionately, much more so than they use Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. And I think that's what's really causing this enormous embarrassment. And to be frank, the behaviour of its proprietor, most recently in the last few days, when England has suffered a great atrocity in Southport, something that has really shaken the nation and, of course, led to these terrible riots. And what has Mr Musk taken it upon himself to do in that moment to our Prime Minister as he seeks to assuage the nation and contain these riots? He's gone to war with the Prime Minister.
It's an interesting point. That do you buy the argument that Musk believes in absolutist free speech to the extent that he allows everything to be amplified, or actually is his version of free speech appears to amplify certain things, certain arguments, certain positions? Would you say that?
Well, I think he's been quite explicit recently in showing that he endorses and actually amplifies, he encourages, he reposts, he gives engagement to really some quite fringe right-wing beliefs. But also, I mean, he's not a man who cares about free speech in the way that he conducts his business. And let's not forget, he actually sued my organization, the Center for Countering Digital Hate, last year, trying to silence us by, it's a long and convoluted story, but basically for asking for $10 million from us. And a court in California found that his lawsuit against us was strategic litigation against public participation, a SLAPP suit. Which means that he was using the law courts to silence an enemy. So this is a man who, claims to love freedom of speech, but doesn't like it when it goes against his interests.
So what's his game then? Because I can't quite understand this. Because is this a political thing? He's interviewing Donald Trump later today. Does he want to wield political influence in the manner of proprietors of newspaper and media groups throughout history? Is that what he's trying to do? Is he trying to actually have an ideological position he wants to push, or does he just want to get more people using the platform? Because this appears to be the wrong way of doing that. What's the game here? I can't quite understand it.
Stig, I can't quite work it out myself. And of course, neither you nor I can look into the hearts of other people and tell us what they're thinking. But it does appear that he's turning X into a platform that's sort of a rolling car crash. And he's saying, well, you know what? People always look at car crashes, so let's put ads on the side of it. And that's his business model. And that's a bit bananas, really, because actually most advertisers don't want their ads appearing next to terrorist content, next to hate content. And that's certainly in the past, they've taken advertising away from him. I mean, my argument would be that his behavior in recent weeks, whether it's attention grabbing or it's deeply ideologically felt, is actually unconscionable. And no patriotic British company should be doing business with Mr. Musk, giving him money, enabling him, rewarding him, validating his behavior. And I hope to see that advertisers will respond over the coming days and weeks and seek to reduce their spend on that platform. Send him a message, in his checkbook.
And just finally, before you go, I'm intrigued to know how much influence do you think he and Twitter have? Because at one point we can all say Twitter is for politicians and the media, which is certainly true. It's a dwindling platform to a certain extent. And yet the mobilization of the riots showed how influential Twitter was. It definitely played a part in that. He's interviewing Trump, as I say today. He's not going to interview Kamala Harris. She won't speak to him. He wouldn't speak to her. So he's going to have some sort of impact on the American election. How significant is that impact? How big a mover of the dial is X, do you feel?
I'm a great believer that people have the right to hold their opinions and have the right to express them. If you're a newspaper proprietor, you have the right to have an opinion on the world around you. And you have the right to use your publication to publish that to millions. But the problem is that platforms, social media platforms specifically, want legally to be treated like neutral platforms, places for free speech. And where theoretically one wouldn't expect the proprietor to have his thumb on the scale, would we now? And so as he demonstrates through his own behavior that X is actually a publication platform to endorse his views and views that benefit him economically and politically, I think it becomes ever clearer that we can't continue to treat it as though it is some kind of neutral platform. It is, in fact, a publication platform through which he proselytizes hate and disinformation to hundreds of millions of people. And in that respect, we should be able to regulate it as we do any other form of publication or broadcast and have it subject to the law.
I think that's such a very solid point there, Imran. Imran, so grateful to you for speaking to us. Thank you for taking the time.